From the CISO Series, it's cybersecurity headlines.
TikTok denies a breach, China accuses US of bad behavior, and London buses get hacked. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have been bringing to you on this week's cybersecurity headlines. And now we get a chance for some insight, opinion, and most definitely some expertise on these stories and more from our guest, Jason Elrod, the CISO at MultiCare Health System. Jason, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks a lot. Fantastic to be here.
All right, before we move on, we got to, of course, thank our sponsor for today, Sneak. Developer tested, security approved. Remember, you can join us now on YouTube Live. To do so, go to CISOseries.com, look for the Week in Review page. You can find the link there. We are not going to wait for you, though, because we have a scant 20 minutes. So much news to fit in. Jason, I can't wait to dig into this. Our first story here, TikTok denies a breach. Late last week, a hacking group known as Against the West claimed on a forum to have breached TikTok and WeChat. It shared screenshots of a database from both companies purporting to hold 790 gigabytes of data, including user data, authentication tokens, server info, and more. TikTok denied the claim, further saying the data in question couldn't have been scraped from its platform. It just wasn't what's the things that were publicly available to scrape. Security researcher Troy Hunt confirmed that the data was valid, at least some of it, but didn't find any non-public data that would indicate a breach. Researcher Bob Dianchenko said the data likely came from the third-party Hangzhou Julin network technology. So Jason, we'll have to wait to find if this was an actual breach, a stunt. The WeChat and TikTok aren't owned by the same company, so it'd be weird that a single server would have them if it was internally theirs. Still opens up the possibility for further fraud from opportunists, including spammers, who could claim to have your data even if they don't. I'm curious, what are your thoughts of TikTok as kind of this this central orb in terms of having this gravitational force when it comes to security at this point?
Well, I think this particular story, to me, it's a nothing burger. Is what it is, actually. Okay. I think no matter how much I think TikTok and WeChat are privacy nightmares, I don't think they were necessarily hacked in this case. So like you mentioned, I think there's two different companies involved here. So a single hack to develop a data set that combines information of both, highly suspect. So I agree, it's probably a third party. So I'm going to fall into that camp and say with neither TikTok nor WeChat being the direct source of this stolen data, but it really falls into that almost a third party risk issue for them. But to your question, the forum post is pretty much the equivalent of a clickbait headline with a relatively unknown hacking group looking for some notoriety and fame. That's really what it is. You wouldn't believe what I have in this drop. There you go. Click here to find out. I personally consider, again, both TikTok and WeChat as privacy threat actors without being hacked. So even if this was true, it's hardly any worse than what they're probably currently doing in their regular day-to-day operations, as far as I'm concerned.
It's nice to know that hacking forums have to deal with like the nuisance of like a BuzzFeed listicle, like at this point. Like it's very weird the analogs you see in those kind of worlds for sure.
100%. I wonder how big the botnet is there.
Yeesh. Oh, we have to move on because that will give me nightmares. Our next story here, China accuses the U.S. of cyber attacks and cyber espionage. On Monday, the Chinese National Computer Virus Emergency Response Center, top 10 response center of all time, published a report co-authored by a private Chinese cybersecurity firm that accuses the NSA of conducting tens of thousands of malicious attacks on network targets in China in recent years through its elite hacker unit. The attacks include a university that focuses on aeronautical and space research. The foreign ministry in Beijing stated, "We ask the U.S. to provide an explanation and urge them to immediately stop this illegal move." This sounds, Jason, a lot like old-fashioned Cold War-style propaganda or saber-rattling. You choose your word de jour here, as opposed to a reaction from a single specific incident. Do you feel this could be a further retribution? We just recently had the Nancy Pelosi Taiwan trip that raised all sorts of hackles. Or does your spidey sense maybe tell you something different about this?
Well, first off, this is Madonna singing Like a Virgin level of irony here. How about you come clean on the TikTok data privacy practices? Then we can talk. But seriously, to your point, I really don't have much to add here. Consider this just what you stated there. Another example of Cold War theater and nation state posturing. I don't think it's tied to anything specific instantiating from an event standpoint, But I do think we're going to see more and more of this in the years to come from all sides, as a function of asymmetric or irregular warfare activities, honestly. We've seen it right now all over the place. So I think social opinion and psychological operations, of which this falls into the category for me, are really a new front line, and that's not going away. And that front line is everywhere.
It does make me think that this is the equivalent of like Kremlinology back in the Cold War, like where we have to parse the tea leaves of what this announcement actually means, because assuredly cyber operations are taking place between nation states, especially the pole of the East and China, like that. There is This is happening. We pretty much all know that. It seems weird for China to call it out specifically and not be specific, right?
And I think the criminology component you mentioned is the criminology of it is important to know. Like when, why, what, to what extent. So sometimes the content of the message isn't the message. The context of the message is really more important. Who sent it out, when they sent it out, time of day, in response to certain events, or either in the future or in the past. This happened, or this is going to happen. So we're preparing or we're reacting to it. So that's a good call out. So, and a way to really look at that social engineering aspect of it. Look at the context, not just the content.
All right. Well, big infrastructure story this week. Next up here, London's biggest bus operator hit by a cyber incident. The British transportation group Go Ahead this week shared a statement with the London Stock Exchange indicating unauthorized activity had been discovered on its network and could have impacted bus and driver rosters, thus disrupting operations. Go Ahead is London's largest bus company and also operates several high-capacity railway services in the UK. So, Jason, this could sound maybe an innocuous story from a U.S. perspective, but points directly to an infrastructure weakness that's directly parallel when we're thinking of something like gas shortages that were threatened during the Colonial Pipeline attacks. A city full of frustrated commuters has a lot, can be a powder keg politically and otherwise. Given that most transit companies in the U.S. are perennially cash-strapped, how would you handle what might seem like a low-profile threat?
Wow. There's a lot to unpack there, but I wouldn't consider it a low-profile threat, actually. See,
Okay.
mass transit in any capacity is critical infrastructure. So this is a great example of what I would call a force multiplied supply chain disruption, meaning you stop the workforce from getting to work. You're not disrupting one supply chain, you're disrupting all of them at once. So you have a capacity here to have a massive impact. For instance, it could be very impactful for other critical infrastructure, not just travel, right? So like healthcare and other services. If our staff can't get to the hospital to treat patients, patients don't get treated. And if you can adjust the traffic patterns in a very busy city like London or anywhere, you can cause a massive disruption. So it's on the same level of disrupting the power grid, in my opinion, because like I said, it is force multiplied. You handle one disruption, one attack, you affect multiple supply chains with multiple, butterfly effects to that one aspect there. Now, the question there was about the cash strapped, right? How do we, given most transit companies in the U.S. Are perennially cash strapped? Well, it's not always an issue with the cash or not. And what I mean by that is sometimes it's knowledge. And I'm going to give some shout out here to CISA here. That would be the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency here in the US. So they provide a great set of services that are free. We've already paid for them with taxes. So take advantage of them. Get that basic hygiene in place, and they can come in here and really, I would say, uplift the maturity of security programs of organizations that didn't think they could or don't have the wherewithal to do that, dedicated security team or security force. And with my experience with the folks over there at CISA, they've been very good. So I would recommend it.
Yeah, definitely resources to check out. We covered those when they were out on cybersecurity headlines. So good to see those are well regarded in the industry. Next up here, Cloudflare cuts off kiwi farms. This is a follow-up from last week. Cloudflare reversed course and cut off services to the controversial site. In late August, it cut off kiwi farms from paid services, but was still providing free DDoS protection services. Cloudflare CEO Matthew Prince said the move was in response to imminent danger from the site at a pace law enforcement can't keep up with. He denied the move came in response to public pressure. Last week, Prince defended providing DDoS protection and caching services to sites with, quote, despicable content, and called cutting off sites a dangerous precedent. Jason, here we have the ethical challenge of whether a service provider has the right or obligation to police its customers. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Okay, this one's going to be a bit complicated. Well, let's dive into it. Right? I 100% do not agree with any sort of online harassment, hate, or criminal activity. So from that standpoint, I'm all for holding individuals and organizations accountable for the impact of their speech and their actions. I also believe that as a private company, Cloudflare is 100% within its rights to either provide services or not to a site or a collection of sites based on its own moderation policies. Adding to that, though, from a personal standpoint, I'm also somewhat of a free speech absolutist. If an obvious and imminent danger isn't present to individuals or infrastructure, then it gets very messy very fast when one group wants to silence an opposing voice just because they disagree with what's being said. A free society is based on being able to freely express ideas and opinions, speak and be heard, listen, understand, and respond. That type of discourse is vital. When you try to silence or cancel someone, you aren't making those ideas go away. You're eroding the freedom of expression, and that impacts everyone. Putting a security lens on this, if you want to see the threat actors in your environment, right? So you can build the right mitigations and controls to address the risks. You don't want to tune out all the alerts and call it good. Because, it doesn't solve the issue. Plus, I do, this also has some non-trivial levels of irony for me here when you think about it. So what I'm hearing is folks want to remove the security protections for a group they say is promoting illegal activity so they can perform an illegal activity against them, like a DDoS. So I hope people would sit on that one for a second.
Well, and what's interesting about this is it seemed like for a while Prince was willing to walk back their previous stance of taking down sites like the Daily Stormer, taking down 8chan a couple of years ago, more recently, and saying, we're going to do things that, like, how we acted in the past maybe wasn't acceptable from our current lens now, and we weren't right to do it then, and then to have to a week later, I have to imagine there was, he says it's not related to public pressure, but I wonder if there was pressure from, I don't know, regulatory, I don't know what. It seems weird for them to back off that almost immediately, unless they were in contact with some sort of law enforcement agencies or something like that. But in that case, I think transparency would probably be the order of the day, unless this is, I don't want to pretend like we have all the information necessarily. We can only act on what Cloudflare is telling us at this point, especially as a private company, for sure.
Right. And if there was clear and present danger that we're unaware of because of the lack of transparency for whatever reason, then of course you're going to want to do that. You're going to want to take action. It's like that threat actor who's actively doing something in your environment. You want to stop it. You want to take care of it. What you don't want to do is hide it and not look at it and not look for it. And I think that's the component. And plus, like I said, don't enable other illegal activity. Just because,
that is the point I think we haven't heard a lot, is that you're opening the door for another private company to be I think that is certainly an interesting point that is underrepresented out there for sure. Before we move on, let's spend a few moments now with our sponsor, Snyk. Developers want to code fast, and security wants to ship securely, and they want to do it all from the cloud. That's why they both choose Snyk. Backed by industry-leading security intelligence, Snyk provides real-time scanning with automated fixes and remediation advice right from the tools and workflows developers use. Code, dependencies, containers, cloud environments, all of it. And while developers are building securely, Snyk gives security teams a bird's eye view of all of their projects and cloud environments so they can prioritize and focus their efforts in the right places. Developer tested, security approved. Start your free Snyk account at snyk.co/cybersecurity. That's SNYK.co/cybersecurity. KeyBank customer data stolen from a third-party provider. Threat actors stole social security numbers, addresses, and account numbers of home mortgage holders at KeyBank. The breach was allegedly caused by KeyBank's third-party vendor Overby Seawell, which provides insurance services. The bank publicly apologized to customers on social media over the weekend, offering them 2 free years of free Equifax identity protection. While KeyBank is working with Overby Seawell to identify the root cause, both companies have already been named in a class action lawsuit as a result of the breach. So, Jason, this appears to be another case of insider risk, specifically from a vendor. I guess you could call that third-party risk. These are two different ways. I say that not to be puck. I think there is a different way to view each of those, which is why I think it's important to make that distinction. There are at least two ways you could take this story, Jason. So I'm curious, kind of your breakdown here. This as an ongoing weakness that third-party vendors could pose. And do you have any thoughts about this whole idea of offering free credit monitoring as a way to calm the masses?
Great question. I'm seeing more of these kinds of stories lately, honestly. Third-party and fourth-party plus risk is starting to grow as all of our solution supply chains get more and more integrated, both upstream and downstream for organizations. So due diligence in the selection of partners and solutions for the capabilities you need is already taxing on limited resource. And it's only going to get harder when we start to see what's the next chain link in the chain and the next one and the next one. As we start seeing people subspecialize in the market. So the potential threat landscape for compromising companies is growing at every stop on the way. And as we become more cloud first, more sort of like integrated solutions where you have the specialists combining or composed services, we're going to see more and more work demand against the capacity to really do that level of due diligence. One of the issues here, though, is where does it stop? Right? Where does it stop? So if you know somebody who did something criminal, are you to blame for that crime? Better yet, and what is often lost here is that in addition to the people who had their information stolen, the organization itself is a victim of the crime. Just because it was lost, you have to realize that they were a victim of the crime. The criminal violated them first. They attacked and stole from them. What kind of irks me a little bit is the immediate class action lawsuit, which I don't think we mentioned on here, that came out of that, right? To me, that's a form of victim blaming that perpetuates further attacks on a victim of a crime. In this case, the organizations. They both got hit with class action lawsuits. I think it really is akin to saying that if somebody didn't dress provocatively, then they wouldn't have been attacked and should have known better. So they're to blame for the criminal's actions. The focus here needs to be bringing on the actual criminals to justice, helping the victims, and creating a more secure environment, not looking for some sort of payday at a victim's expense. As far as the credit monitoring is concerned, I think I have 4 or 5 rolling subscriptions to various credit monitoring service now, thanks to privacy breaches over the years. At this point, for me at least, I don't think it helps all that much and is actually starting to add a little bit of noise to my own email box. But for those folks who are the first-time victims in this context, I think it is something they should have in place.
Yeah, and there's a really interesting point that there is a line between the knee-jerk, I need to blame this company, versus legitimate cases of negligence. 100%. But that is, I don't think that's something we can, that is something an investigation needs to assess. Unfortunately, as much as we would like, I need to punish someone that made something bad happen to me, wanting that instinct, we don't know all the facts of it yet. And, to your point, just because you trusted a third party does not mean you were negligent in doing so in that context.
Right. I have a front door to my house. If I don't lock it and somebody comes in and steals all of my stuff, is it my problem? Was it my fault? The door was there. They came in. I could have locked it. And I don't know the details of the KeyBank situation, but if you think about it, I've left my keys in my car. I left the door to my house unlocked and somebody came in and stole my stuff. Too bad you could have locked your door. Too bad, you shouldn't have parked your car outside. No, the focus needs to be on how do we help the victims? How do we make it more secure and not happen again? And actually bring the actual criminals to justice. Class action, those guys. If you can.
I mean, you could file the claim. I mean, good luck.
You can file the claim. I mean, when we finally find them,
issue.
Get the attestation right, we're set.
All right. Well, next up here, Finland to award companies cybersecurity grants. Finland has suffered a number of recent cyber attacks, including a denial of service attack that disabled the Finnish Parliament's website on August 9th. To help defend against future incidents in its critical sectors, the Finnish government will begin distributing cybersecurity vouchers for cybersecurity improvements to Finnish businesses. Businesses can earn vouchers totaling anywhere from 15,000 to 100,000 euros, depending on factors like size and for-profit status. Security experts are encouraged by Finland's track record of success using government programs to drive positive business change. This sounds like a good idea in principle. It's almost like a reverse bug bounty in some ways. Like, we're going to pay you first to patch everything. And one might certainly find work in it might work in a community-minded country like Finland. But in light of stories that we've seen around, things like COVID payments being stolen or misused throughout the pandemic, I'm curious here, do you feel like a voucher program, if deployed in most countries in a similar way, would simply set itself up for some type of abuse? It's free government money, after all.
I actually kind of love the story. And I'm going to tie it to the other ones we talked about, actually.
Okay.
It's almost the exact opposite of the key bank headline, right? Company gets attacked, and instead of attacking them again, we make some resources available to help make them more secure and cyber resilient. This kind of public-private partnership is the right direction to take. And in my opinion, can be something that could literally help solve those third and fourth party risks from happening in smaller organizations that can't afford full-time security programs, right? This helps raise the security posture across the board. Or as a friend of mine once said, when you raise the water in the tub, all the rubber duckies get higher, not just one. Scholar there.
But Mr. Ernie, wasn't it? Yeah.
I don't know. We talked about the Muppets are legit. Also out there. As far as abusing the program is concerned, there's always going to be bad elements and criminals that need to be addressed accordingly. And then maybe a call out to CISA here to help alleviate some of that. We could focus on critical infrastructure first, and then to receive those funds or vouchers, and require maybe a CISA security audit prior to. Yes, you have a need. Here's your money, and then post the award to ensure the funds are doing what they're saying doing. It should not just be a click and get some money kind of thing. But I think there are ways to structure that program using services we have to do exactly what I just said earlier, raise the bar for everybody. And that I applaud the effort. I think there's a way that we should probably implement something like that.
All right, and our last story here, speaking of CISA asked for feedback on reporting rules. Back in March, President Biden signed a new law requiring critical infrastructure owners and operators to report major cyber attacks to CISA within 72 hours and ransomware within 24 hours. CISA Director Jen Easterly said officials will formally begin asking industry leaders for feedback on the regulatory structure for this reporting in the next couple of days. The agency will use the feedback to better understand what's going on in the private industry ecosystems to better build an effective regulatory apparatus. Easterly emphasized she wants to build a consultative rule-making process. So, Jason, do you anticipate compliance with this program? Being so let me just set this up. I'm always skeptical.
I'll say this right now. Non-compliance with a federal regulation is a non-starter. Okay.
So we as a CISO, I would expect nothing less. Does it raise your eyebrows when we see rules that industry famously has been like mandatory reporting and asking them to consult on that? Does that make those rules more effective for industry, or does that mean they're going to be softer than maybe they should be?
Well, going back to compliance with the program, organizations are going to do their best to comply with this one if and when it goes into effect. So, but I do think there are going to be some legal challenges to it before that happens, though. So I think the deadline may shift a little bit. But I will give my non-official recommendations or questions on here. For instance, before we mandate organizations do this type of reporting, how about a safe harbor clause to shield the organization from class action lawsuits associated with those disclosures? Better yet, how about attaching some of those resources, right, that will be deployed to assist in the remediation for these types of events that we're required to report? Also, consider making them private and not publicly searchable until the incident has been remediated. Plus, I do have some other questions. Furthermore, we already have some codified reporting requirements associated with things like HIPAA and various state level regulations. So this really needs a preemption clause in regards to reporting requirements if it's going to be successful, because you have to rationalize those efforts and just not add additional burden to the reporting entities. So basically, if you're going to do this, then don't make it security theater and just add bureaucratic burden. Do something that actually helps. And I think it's my off the cuff recommendations to do that.
All right. Well, Jason, before we get out of here, was there any story that was a thumbs up or an eye roller for you? It's just something you reacted strongly to in today's rundown.
Wow. Okay. So my eye roll would be the China accuses U.S. of cyber attacks and cyber espionage.
Those eyes rolled all
Way
the
to
way back
go.
around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Noted. Okay, so that gets a big eye roll for me on that one, and I think of the one I think I'll give my big thumbs up to is really Finland. Kind of really putting their money where their mouth is in regards to providing cybersecurity grants. And I think with a little bit of tailoring, we can do that and combine that with programs that are already existing right now. So I think that gets a big thumbs up for me.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jason Elrod, the CISO at MultiCare Health Systems. Thank you. Thank you. You were coming with the hot takes. I appreciate it. A great insight. It's exactly what we want on the show. Where can people find you on the cyberspace if they're so inclined?
Hey, you know what? I'm just going to say, go ahead and look me up on LinkedIn. Look for a connect there. And yeah, pleasure to be on the show today. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right. Well, and thank you once again. This was just fantastic. And of course, thanks to our sponsor, Sneak, developer tested, security approved. A reminder to join us next week for Super Cyber Friday, where the discussion will be hacking like a cyber crook, an hour of critical thinking about attack paths. You can register at CISOseries.com by clicking on the Super Cyber Friday logo, appropriately enough. We'll be back next week with another week in review show. And in the meantime, you can still get your daily news fix through cybersecurity headlines every single day. Give us about 6 minutes. We'll get you all caught up. Until next week, I'm Rich Stroffolino, reminding you to have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOSeries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.